one dear lady came up to me and said, you know, she's trying to help lots of people in her where she's living, but as soon as these people fall into sin, and the churches tell them not to come anymore. I mean, I don't know what the church is there for. It's there for sinners, isn't it? And okay, Christians fall, Christians get into problems, but we have to have compassion as well as discipline, and restore one another in the spirit of humility and love. So let's pray that we'll all go away with a little bit more compassion than maybe we had before. You wouldn't be here unless you had some, but we all need more. I need more. There are times, you know, when I feel that I just want to walk out of the center and never go back again. There are times when someone knocks on the door and I want to pretend I'm not in there. You know, we all come to those places, but then when we feel like giving up, we feel like giving in, the Holy Spirit revives our hearts again. Amen. So one of the things about the Turning Point seminars when we teach it is that people coming to it usually pick up a lot of information, but they usually go away having been ministered to as well, because there's something in the material that touches their life. So that is always a spin-off and an added bonus. Right, we haven't got a lot of time now, so I'll just flick through some things because I want to talk about the Turning Point thing itself. But another thing we do deal with in Turning Point is the problem of codependency. This may be a new concept to you, a new word to you, but as it says there, a codependent is a person who seeks to get his or her sense of well-being from the dependent loved one. They learn to lie about their feelings. So the enabler often turns into a codependent, where they become addicted to the person, to the problem of the person with the addiction. And they begin to see themselves as the martyr of the family, and they get all their self-worth from it. And it's not unusual, you see, and I'll pass on quickly now, but it's not unusual in the case, classic case we talk about, wife got an alcoholic husband. The alcoholic husband gets saved, gets delivered, gets converted, becomes an active, outgoing Christian, and soon there's a divorce. The man's got saved, now the wife can't cope with the new husband. He doesn't need that level of support that she's always given, so her role is immediately attacked, and she finds that she's lost her reason for living. She's going through withdrawals because he doesn't need that same support as he once did. So commonly there can come a problem there, a divorce will take place, and it's not uncommon for her then to marry another alcoholic. And that happens. And codependency is a problem. We sometimes find it in our center. A classic case we had not long ago where a married couple, the guy came into the program. He'd been a heroin addict in London for many years. His wife was the breadwinner. She was the one who kept her job going. He couldn't work, he had this habit, so she was supporting him, encouraging him to find help, but he wasn't doing it, so he was continuing in his wild lifestyle. Then he got converted, came into the program. She continued working in London, paying the bills, keeping the mortgage going, keeping the HP on the car, etc., etc. Then he graduated the program. She came down to Wales and lived locally in the village there, and we were able to see the traumatic experience that marriage went through, because when they came back together again, he wasn't the same guy. He wanted to be the husband. He wanted to be the leader in the marriage. He wanted to be the earner. And immediately she had a different man, and she no longer saw herself now as the provider. He didn't need her in that same way, and it took quite a bit of, you know, love and guidance to get them to make the adjustments. And there are people in our churches who are in this problem of codependency, and again they go through a whole stage of progression of behavior and feelings, which if they don't get help can lead to the same conclusion of separation and tragic events. Codependency is then serving the creature rather than the creator. Sometimes the codependent wife can be a Christian, but she will be dragged down into the lifestyle of the person that she's trying to help and support. And so sometimes she will turn to the loved one's problem rather than be strong enough to bring him through to what she has believed in all the time is a Christian and a spiritual deliverance. I just want to mention very quickly, before we use the last half an hour, is Chris Moss here this morning? Yeah, okay, Chris, so you're going to come and say something in the last half an hour, all right? About children, again, we're talking about families earlier. 1 in 4 children in the classroom comes from a home where there is chemical dependency. Now, that is an American statistic, but if you get hold of the latest stuff that's coming out through Alcohol Concern and people like that, that is about the same in this country. This thing here was issued by Dysfunctional Families Recovery Trust, the British Association of Children of Alcoholics, and in here it says, in November 1989, the National Society of Prevention of Cruelty to Children in the States, United States, reported that 2 out of 3 of all reported child abuse was linked to chemical abuse. In the UK, 43% of all child abuse has been linked to chemical abuse. So alcohol, unfortunately, is the doorway to many, many problems, and it is also tied in very, very clearly with child abuse. 1 in 4 children in our classrooms come from a home where there's a chemical dependency. And most of the times that chemical dependency will be alcohol. Children of alcoholics. See, we need to target the children who are in these situations because their lifestyle is being totally destroyed by the influence of their parents' lifestyle. Children of alcoholics are 3 times more likely to become chemically dependent as children of non-alcoholics. Twice as likely to suffer from mental illness, often suffer from poor self-image, are easily frustrated, have social and school adjustment problems when entering school, have poor decision-making skills, lack positive coping skills, make up 50% of all juvenile delinquents. Now, these facts are just as appropriate to children of dysfunctional families as they are to children that come from homes where the parents are alcoholics. So wherever there is a dysfunctional family, you will find that these social conditions begin to affect the children. So I hope our evangelism will be across the board. It sounds sometimes judgmental to say it, but unfortunately the facts are that maybe the less well-off areas of our communities are affected more by these problems than maybe the more prosperous. Unfortunately, that is a fact of life. And therefore, we need to be evangelizing not only the nice areas, not only the nice parts of our community, the nice people, but getting down into the city areas, getting down, you know, into the, I wouldn't say slums these days, but certainly, you know, we all know what we're talking about, the areas that are no-go areas very often, the areas that are not welcoming to the to the gospel. We need to include them because there are children locked behind those doors that are not being given the opportunity to enjoy life as children. And you're going to begin to get them into your churches. And as they come, they're going to bring the lifestyle that they have grown up with. And so they're going to be difficult kids, maybe. And we need to understand that they're not being difficult for the sake of being difficult. That they're showing patterns of behavior that are normal to them. And because we have been brought up, maybe some of us, in a sheltered environment, we just don't understand why they're behaving like that. They're just a troublemaker, a problem kid to be kicked out. Now, as I've said all along, I think, you know, just as we do in Teen Challenge, we have very strict guidelines. And the guys that come into our program generally come from dysfunctional families. So they find it quite a culture shock. And I think in the same way, our youth groups, our youth clubs, whatever you call them, need to have definite boundaries and need to have well-defined guidelines for young people to observe. And they need to be enforced. But at the same time, we need to understand that the kids coming in are not going to readily accept them, and they may need some sitting down and talking to justify why those rules are there, and that it is normal to come to accept that in a well-ordered society there have to be guidelines and there have to be rules, not to restrict our freedom but to ensure it. And we need to, very often in our centre, one of the fundamental things we have to do is to show the difference between discipline and punishment. Because all our guys, as soon as you start handing out discipline, it's automatically punishment. But there's a difference, because discipline is given for the benefit of the offender. Punishment usually is vengeance by society upon the offender. But we're not there to punish people, we're there to discipline them because we love them. And it hurts the discipliner as much to discipline as the one who's receiving it. Maybe it should hurt him more. So these are the things that children are suffering. Children of alcoholics experience these problems. When a parent is controlled by a life-controlling problem, there is instability in the home. Quickly, let me just flick through. Children go through stages of progression. Learned behavior. They learn to play out a role. Now, in every family, children will show some signs of this, even in functional families. But in a dysfunctional family, the roles that children learn to adopt are basically survival roles. They've learned a certain type of behavior purely to survive. And so the learned behavior will include adopting generally one of 4 different roles. I'll show the slides in a minute, but basically the kids will develop into the good or the perfect kid, the rebellious kid, the silent kid, or the clown. One of the roles they accept. They do this to learn to cope with stress and to find their own protection. I mean, if dad comes home drunk, a kid may find that the safest way to handle that situation is to be the joker. Make dad laugh and he won't hit me. Or another kid may say, I haven't got any humor. The safest thing is to disappear. And so he just merges in with the wallpaper, so he becomes the silent or the lost child, hiding away. And he carries that through into his adult years. And so he doesn't find it easy to build up relationships. And you may have a wallflower in your youth group, and you say, well, that guy's a poor mixer, or she's, just a miserable, disinterested thing. That's, from that high, that's how she survived. And it's not easy to make the change. They've lost their way. The silent one, the clown, the guy that's always fooling around. Why is he always fooling around? That's the way he gets acceptance. He's not deliberately trying to ruin your talk at the epilogue of the youth group, but that's him. That's how he's managed to survive. He's the clown. And we're told that many of the top comedians in the world have come from dysfunctional families. They've learned that through the gift of humor, they can make their parents laugh, and that's survival. And many of them have developed that into a career. Basically, they learn 3 rules very quickly. This is true in all dysfunctional families. It says here, the secret that is best not kept. They learn 3 rules: don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. You're beginning to help hurting young people, helping teenagers. They have 3 rules that has been embedded upon their mind from childhood up. Survival rules: don't talk about the problem. You'll say, well, tell me what the problem is. Blank. They're not going to share it. They're afraid to. Don't talk about the problem. Don't trust anyone. And don't feel. Don't let it get to you. So they become non-feeling people. They don't get excited about life. They have a very poor self-image. They learn 3 basic rules: don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. The seeking out behavior, the searching behavior. What will work for me in that situation? I've just mentioned the roles they play. What will work for me? At this point, enabling sets in. Dad's got the problem, Mum's got the problem. What will work in this situation? Maybe if I do this. Maybe if I am a better child. Even children begin to blame themselves for their parents' problems. It's amazing. Particularly when it comes to abuse. As you know, when we had our girls' centre, the girls that came in with the problem of abuse, they all blamed themselves for the abuse that they'd suffered at the hands of their fathers. Enabling starts, delusion sets in, seeking out behavior, searching what will work for me in this situation. And then harmful behavior is developed. Their defenses have been built. They get locked in. They see themselves as a victim. Their behavior becomes a role to deny their pain to enable them to cope. They internalize the blame. They feel responsible. And they begin to believe that the painful lifestyle is normal. That's harmful. The guy I mentioned about his wife, where they had the problem adjusting, he was brought up, his parents were publicans in South London. And he said the family lived in the pub. And they were just kids, you know, 6, 7 years of age, living in the pub. And he said every night, Mum and Dad were usually in a state of intoxication by the time they closed the pub. And he said it was our job as kids to help them up the stairs and get them up into the flat. And he said he remembers on one occasion, his mother and father were in their bedroom, and they were having a row, and he walked in there, and he said, there was my dad as drunk as a lord, and my mother was drunk, my father was holding a knife, and my mother was just encouraging him and mocking him and telling him to kill himself. He said, I had to go in as a little kid and take away the knife. He said, I had to put Dad to bed. I had to make sure he was all right. And he said, I was just a kid. And so the feelings begin to get very mixed up. But you know, one of the most tragic things about it was that he said, on one occasion, one of his friends invited him out to their home for Sunday tea. He said, I went out to this home, and he said, I couldn't believe it. I went in and I saw the table was laid. The family sat down, and I had a place, and I sat down. The family said grace. He said, for the first time I realized that my lifestyle was not normal. I had convinced myself that what I was suffering was normal. And when I saw it wasn't normal, he said the pain of that was horrific. And then the shame and the guilt, and I didn't want anybody to know where I came from or what my family was like. The horror of it. And he's just a kid. And so they planned to escape. And before long, he says, when he was 12, 13, he was escaping from his painful situation by getting involved with older guys, and through that he got involved in drugs himself. His family had a compulsive form of behavior, alcohol. He developed a form of compulsive behavior. He turned to drugs to try to escape and try to get through the pain. And so he carried this defensive lifestyle with him now when he got married. And had not there been an intervention in his life, then there may already have been a divorce, or if there had been any children in the marriage, they were going to be affected by his feelings. The feelings of the children swing. Anger is a common feeling. This lad used to say, one night he said, you know, I'd see my dad drunk and I feel angry, I feel like killing him. The next day he said, I'd see him looking so pathetic that I would feel sorry for him. I was constantly swinging backwards between a love-hate relationship with my parents. I hated them for what they were doing, and then I loved them because I saw how desperate they were. Shame, low self-worth. The kids internalize this blame, the guilt, the hurt. The fear of the unexpected is a normal part of the life of kids who are in dysfunctional families. Will Dad come home tonight? We have a lad in our program, a guy in our program who's a staff member now. He came to us back in 1988 as a heroin addict from Glasgow. He tells the story of how, you know, his wife used to send him out to get some food for the kids. She'd give him a $5, go out and buy some milk and bread and what have you. She says, you know, it's a silly thing to do because she wouldn't see him for a couple of days. The kids never knew if he was going to come home. The fear of the unexpected. Jimmy Lee tells the story out in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where he lives, the author of the Turning Point program. He says there was a family in Chattanooga, which apparently is a very middle-class suburban town in the States. And he said there's a family there with 3 brothers. They got an alcoholic father, and they never know what state he's going to be in when he comes home. So they have a pact between them. They sleep in the same bedroom, and they have a gun. And every night that gun is passed from one kid to the other. And if Dad comes in to attack any of them, the pact is that whoever's got the gun will use it on Dad. That's the condition they go to sleep in at night. They don't know really what's going to happen. Their minds are being affected, their personalities are being affected, and they're growing up into adults who are going to carry this through to the next generation. We need to help these kids. We need to understand that our evangelism is going to draw them in and have an appreciation of what they're feeling. Loneliness and isolation is a product of the dysfunctional family. They develop these survival behaviors to cover their pain, to get their needs met, and they also have to serve the family function. What do I mean by that? Well, sometimes you see, it may not be for this reason, but it may well be. Sometimes you see a 5-year-old walking down the road, hand in hand with a 2-year-old, going down to the shop, coming back with a carrier bag. Why? It may be because mum is just flat out on her back, hangover. The kid has to serve the family function. She has to become mum to the ones that are younger than her. She's not being a child. She's not knowing the delights of childhood. She's already serving the family function. The lad at 7, he has to be dad. Dad's never around. He's got to light the fires. He's got to put the rubbish out. He's got to do the paper round to get some money to try to serve the family function. And then when these kids are growing up into teenagers and they come into our churches, we say, you know, we can't handle them. You know, stop, ask yourself. Question wisely, listen carefully. Try to appreciate maybe the background that they've come from and seek by God's help to minister into that with love and delicacy. And, you know, let's have an appreciation that these people have got very complex lives. And I'm not suggesting, you know, you get into all the psychotherapy and all that business. I'm not suggesting that. There may be a place for it, but we don't get into that too much in our center. We don't do a lot of parlor psychology. I don't think it's really necessary. There are times when people need to talk and they need to pour out the past and they need to find healing and they need to find release. We major on the fact that if they're in Christ, they're new creatures. The old is gone, the new has come. Healing can come. The blood of Jesus Christ cleanses away the guilt and it gives us a foundation to build a new life on. And we encourage them to major on more what they are now and what they're going to be than what they've been. And we find that can work quite well. And so let's recognize what has happened. Let's recognize all the dynamics that have been at work in their life in order that we may be more understanding of them. Because without help, they may develop, they're more likely to develop some form of compulsive behavior themselves. For example, they may become a workaholic, that perfectionist idea. I mean, I guarantee there are quite a lot of people in this room this morning who are bordering on, if are not, workaholics. Maybe one myself. Because, you see, we've come to say that that is a good Protestant ethic to work. And if we're not careful, we can become so absorbed in our work that it's to the exclusion of everything else. When I was in a seminar with Jimmy Lee, the author of Turning Point program, we were looking at the four phases of addiction. And he said, you guys, and we were all ministers, he said, you look at these 4 phases of addiction and ask yourself, are you in any one of those phases at the moment concerning a problem in your life? And you say, well, you shouldn't, ministers shouldn't be anywhere near any of those phases. And when we'd finished, he said, all right, I'll share with you, because obviously he said, you're not going to open up to me. He said, I'm knocking on the door of phase 3. I'm nearly getting to a state of harmful dependency with a problem in my life. He said, I'll tell you what that problem is. He said, I am a sports fanatic. I come home from work, and in America there's a permanent sports channels on the TV. He said, I sit down, I switch on the sports channel. I get my tea brought in on a tray, and I'm sitting there going, watching the sports. He said, I could have a ticket to every ball game in Chattanooga, and I could spend every spare second I've got indulging in watching sport. And that, he said, could become a life-controlling problem for me. And I have to recognize that, and I have to take positive steps to guard against it. So, we have to guard against these, but these people without help will develop some form of compulsive behavior. They may become a troublemaker, show little zest for life, not take life seriously. And again, you would say, well, why is this kid that's just come into our church group? Why does he behave like this? You know, he's antisocial, he's this, that, and he's the other. We become judgmental, and we don't realize we're not investigating, we're not taking account of the problems that these kids have been brought up with. With help, they can develop self-discipline. They can break the no-talk rule. They can become confident in their own selves so they can develop a style of independent living, and they can develop the gift of humor. There's a lot of potential. There's a lot of help. There's a lot of potential. There's a lot of talent that is in these young people that with our help we can develop. We see it in the center. As I say again, most guys that come in come from dysfunctional families, but they're not stupid. They've got a lot of talents. The artistic talents that these guys have, the musical talents, the singing, the artistry, even expression on paper, it's there. With help, it can be developed, and they begin to blossom like flowers do when the sun begins to shine upon them. You can help them by mirroring reality. In other words, don't tell them, as I said before, what you think they want to hear. Mirror reality. Reflect back what you're really seeing in a non-judgmental way. You can help them by inviting them to share. That means you've got to be prepared to listen. We could talk about that for a while, how hard it is to listen. You may be hearing what I'm saying this morning, but you may not be listening. It's difficult. We need to develop that art. It's difficult to keep concentration when someone's talking. Guarantee you've been thinking already in this session, you know, when's you going to finish, or what's for dinner, or what am I going to do this afternoon? Because, you see, you can listen at 500 words a minute, but on average we speak at 150 words a minute. So you can think and listen far more quickly than a person can speak, so you're racing ahead. You're anticipating what they're going to say. We all do it. I do it in the center. Sometimes, you know, a guy is sitting down and he's talking to me, and for him, that 10 minutes, half an hour is a precious time. He's got my attention all to himself for once. And I'm sitting there thinking about something that I'm going to do tomorrow, because I've heard it all before. I can put them all into a pattern. That's what I think. Then he says something that's very important to him, and then he stops and asks me a question, and I don't remember what he's just said. What does he think of me? It's not that I don't care, but we've got to give those people individual attention. They deserve it. They're entitled to it. We have to listen to what they say. We have to separate the person from the behavior. Talked about all that, and modeling honesty, because they're going to use you as a role model. And they want to be able to see in you something that is so attractive that they want to copy it. You can't take a person further in God than you are yourself. And so you have to model honesty for them to follow. These are the roles that the kids use, and then we'll talk about turning point. The too good child. You know, the kid that believes that if they make a mistake, they're going to get a hammering. So to survive, they've got to be perfect. They grow into perfectionists in life. Very difficult people to live with, impossible to live with. Perfectionists, always blaming themselves. If you don't get 100 out of 100, you failed. 99 is no good. I failed. Then there's the rebellious child. I'm just flicking through. You won't be able to copy all this. Then time is against us, but hopefully we'll do it again sometime. The rebellious child. He's going to work out his aggression by taking the world on. He needs to experience boundaries, learn to make choices, accept the consequences, and to recognize self-worth. Come to terms with who he is. And the withdrawn child, the child that tries to just, you know, disappear out of sight. He needs to overcome fear, to make decisions and to identify his strengths. He needs help. Otherwise he's going to go through life as the little boy lost. Sad picture there. And then you got the clown, you know. The guy that is just doing all he can to get acceptance, keep the party going, make everybody happy, act the clown. He needs to accept responsibility for what he does to gain positive recognition and self-direction. He doesn't need to fool around to be accepted. He needs to see that he is a person worthy of acceptance in himself, and it's not what he does that's going to make him accepted in life. Learns to gain positive recognition and self-direction. So these are some of the roles that kids are involved in. Okay, let's move on very quickly to talking about the Turning Point ministry. Now, I recognize that this ministry is not for every church. Some churches will not be interested in it. I recognize that. I went to speak to a group of ministers some time ago, and it seems a very negative opening remark that I made to them, but I knew them all personally. I knew their churches, and I said, you know, probably not one of you will be interested in what I'm going to tell you. They just invited me along, I think, out of courtesy, something they felt guilty about not doing, so they had to show some interest. But none of their churches were moving in a way that they were attracting people that needed help. So they were sort of very self-satisfied, smug, small churches. And I said to them, well, you know, I'll go through it for you, but probably none of you will be interested in what I have to say. And as it happens, not one of those churches have ever made any approach to me from that day to this. I don't think I offended them, because I know all the ministers personally, but their churches just are not. And if this program doesn't meet a need, then it's a waste of time employing it. And we say that very categorically. If there's no need for it, then don't do it. Don't try something because it's the latest fashion or fad, just because we want to be the first church in our area to do it. If it doesn't meet a need, don't do it. But there is a need, I believe, for churches to have some type of program, whether it be this or something else, that is directed towards people who want help. Because you see, people with life-controlling problems, as this says here, the first step to recovery must be to help him or her break through his or her own denial, where they deny they've got a problem. Do that by carefronting and leveling, getting them to see they have a problem, to become aware of the compulsiveness of his or her own defenses. They admit they've got a problem, and they admit that they've been trying to deny it, build up defenses to protect themselves from the truth. You've torn all that down. Now, where do you go from there? Once you've got the person saying, yes, I need help, what do you do then? You've got that person exposed. That person is vulnerable. That person is still hurting. They've come through to the point where they're saying, okay, you've been successful in getting me to see my need. Now what are you going to do about it? One eminent Christian psychiatrist said to a group of ministers not long ago, he said, you guys are good at opening people up, but you're not so clever at putting them together again. And there's a serious warning there for us. We can expose people to pain that for years they have used every device possible to hide away from. And in that sense, their defenses have served a purpose. They've deadened the pain of their past or present by doing what they're doing. Now you have cut through the defenses. You have exposed them again to the reality of the problem. Are you going to provide now the cure? Are you going to offer them a positive way forward? Or are you just going to say, well, we've done a lot of progress today. We've got you to see that you've got a problem. Now, I'll pray for you. You go away and pray, and God will begin to do the healing. I mean, that's not a very good answer, is it? See, as it says here, overcoming addiction is as much building positive involvements in one's environment as it is withdrawing from addictive attachments. It's not good enough to say, stop what you're doing, unless you can also say, start doing something different. No good to say, stop it, if you can't say, start it. So what we're saying is that you have a problem, you need to stop doing what you're doing and become involved in a whole new positive lifestyle. And I believe that programs such as Turning Point help a person to build up these positive involvements in one's environment. It is a program that is designed to train lay people in local churches to help troubled people. And it does it on the basis of a small group system. So that in the small group, many of you will come from churches that are house fellowships, and you will have learned the value of building relationships in small groups. In the small group, the person is able to gradually build up relationships that are meaningful. I mean, you all sat in this meeting today, and the nature of the occasion demands you sit like that. But I guess you haven't had a very meaningful relationship with the person sitting in front of you, unless you've known them before you came. And we sit in churches. You know, the only sort of relationship we have with each other is examining the pimples on the back of the person's neck in front of us, you know. That's as much as we know about them when we go out. We know, you know, something from the back, but we haven't had a meaningful relationship. We have what Colin Urquhart calls this billiard ball relationships. You know, when you see the snooker, the billiard balls, when the guy puts them on the table, he takes the cue ball, he hits the colored ball, goes into the pocket. But what happens as soon as a billiard ball hits another one, it touches and it parts. It touches and goes away from it. And he says the church is a bit like that. The church is like the snooker table. And every Sunday God gets the balls out of their pockets, which are our homes, puts them on the table, shuffles them around, they hit each other, they click, but they all go back to their pockets. There's no gelling together of relationships. Until next Sunday, next meeting, we all get out of our pockets, get on the table, shuffle it around, and then back we go again. We need something more than, especially for people that are coming out of the world, because people out in the world have had contacts. May not have been good ones. And Leighton is here, a friend of mine from Aberdeen. He was with me in the Teen Challenge coffee shop we ran. We were getting guys coming in getting saved. They were coming to the prayer meetings. Our prayer meetings in the valleys started at 7 o'clock. They were usually over by 8:30. The guys that were getting saved were then standing at the church door saying, "Where's everybody going?" We said, "We're going home." "Going home?" They said, "It's 8:30. We're usually just going out." "Where do we go?" "Do you want us to go home and watch telly with our parents?" "We don't do that." "Where do we go?" Keys in the door, the church is locked. Dark, lights out. We all jump in our cars, and they're walking the streets. Any surprise to get back into their old behavior? If it wasn't for Leighton opening his home up, making his home their home, then they wouldn't have had the Trevor that we were talking about yesterday afternoon. You see, we need to have programs in one way or another, whether it's in our churches or whether it's in homes of carers. Somehow there's got to be a provision so that these people can build positive involvements in their environment. And church programs, churches are ideal places for it. In America, 15 million people meet every week in small groups to get support. And they're non-Christian groups. But there are 15 million people who are recognizing the need to relate to somebody else to get help. And God has established small groups right across the world. He calls them churches. And yet we refer people to other agencies when they come for help. We say, "Well, we're not really equipped for that problem. You better go and see, you know, AA, or you better go to NA, or you better go to the Samaritans and all that lot, you know." We're a referral agency. People should be referring people to us. We should be seen in our community as an agency to receive, because we have got the mechanism, the machinery to do it. Turning Point then is a program that can be introduced into your church. It's been described as a marathon. It's not a quick fix solution. It can take 12 months to get the whole thing in operation. It can start off slowly and gradually build up until it becomes an established part of your church's life. It's only one aspect of your church's life. Just as you have other activities, your youth groups, kids, toddlers, women's meetings, etc., etc., usually there is a missing piece in the church's life. I've had pastors say to me, "We've got our old people's group, we've got our young people's group, we've got our mothers and toddlers, our creche, we've got our teenage group, we've got this, that, and the other, but we've got nothing for street people. We've got nothing for hurting people. Can you help us?" This could fill the missing hole in your church's program. Basically, this is how it works. because Jimmy Lee came out of Teen Challenge, you know, by the way, we would love to work with you in your churches as a Teen Challenge ministry. Help you open ministries to help people, to evangelize. That's another story. But because he came out of Teen Challenge, I guess he has stamped an authority upon this program which recognizes that it must come under the supervision of the leadership of the church. So it comes under the authority of the minister and leadership of the local church. Once the church takes it on board, the church retains full control and ownership of the program. By taking it on board, it doesn't mean you become affiliated with Turning Point or Teen Challenge or whatever. It's a model that you can use. You can call it whatever you like to call it. You take ownership of the program, but one of the conditions of taking it is that it must be exercised under the supervision of the minister. Now, he doesn't do it. It's a program to train lay people to help other people. But for it to be successful, it must come under biblical authority. So the minister is recognized as having an oversight for it all, if you like. Underneath him would come a coordinator who would be appointed by the leadership of the church to give general leadership to the whole Turning Point program. So it has a coordinator, and that coordinator would keep in touch with Turning Point in this country, and he would be our contact. Then a core group is set up. This core group is comprised of people who feel that they have a calling to actually help people with needs. So within your church, you may have some people that would say, yes, we would like to be involved in this. Now initially you may only have 2 people. That's okay, because as the program develops, others will be drawn into it and trained so that they become capable of joining the Turning Point core group. Initially you may not have very many people, but this is the pie chart which shows the whole thing when it's actually in operation. The entrance into the Turning Point program is in the Insight group. The Concerned Persons group is a follow-on from the Insight group. The support group is a follow-on from the Concerned Persons group. Also, you can bring other people from the church's life into the program by forming maybe a special intercessory prayer group, or it can be added to the normal prayer life of the church. But somebody's going to start praying for the Turning Point program. Just like if you've ever done EE. EE would have its prayer triplets, so that when you go out doing evangelism explosion, you know someone's praying for you. Others will say, well, when you have your Turning Point night, we will spend half an hour praying for you. They're drawn into it. They catch the enthusiasm. They can't actually do the teaching or anything else, maybe confined to home, but they can get feedback. They can be encouraged. They can pray. So it has a spin-off of affecting other people. You can have a little prevention group going. We believe prevention is better than cure. Better to have a fence at the top of the cliff than an ambulance at the bottom, as they say. So we can have a prevention group. We have, I actually got them. They're in my car. I meant to get them in the break, but I didn't leave this spot. There are training manuals. There is a prevention manual, and that's full of material that can be used in preventative work. When you go out to schools, there's material that can be used for anti-drug use. And at the same time emphasizing that there is a better way of living. Not just saying no to drugs, but saying yes to Jesus. There's a lot of material that can be used in your church youth groups, so that the community begins to see that you're interested in preventing problems. You're not just there to cure them. So you're having a positive impact into the community. So this communications group would be responsible for doing notice board bulletins, actually giving press releases, telling the press, our church is aware that there is a problem in the community, and we feel that we want to be available to help. So we're starting a help group. You know, in the world they would call it a self-help group. Well, we wouldn't necessarily call it self-help, but we're starting a help group for people that are experiencing problems with different forms of maybe substance abuse, or they want to learn how to help people in their families with it. You may encourage parents to come who are unsaved, who've got teenage children, because you're offering it as a facility to help people to help others. You're not being overtly evangelistic at this point, but when they get into the group, they will see that it is all centered on Christ. So the Turning Point program has a manual, which is the Turning Point Evangelism Manual, showing how the program can be adapted and used in an evangelistic way. And people are getting saved simply by coming into this help group and seeing that, yes, it is Jesus that I need. And so you have the core group of people who will be responsible for giving leadership to these various different pie groups, if you like, or the parts shown in the pie group. The group format, each session has a specific format. Here there are manuals, and as I said, the entry point is the insight group, and there is a manual which has 9 lessons in it, if you like, because it's a 9-week curriculum. There's one for the leader, and there's another one for the person that is in the group. So they have a manual, and each week they will go through the lesson that is in the book. The format is an introduction. We want to try and get people talking. We want to try and get people building up confidence. And so there's a 10-minute introduction when they would use icebreakers, you know, like, you know, what is the most favorite spot in your house? Where were you born? That's the first week you would use that. Non-threatening ways in which people can begin to share about themselves, to begin to hear their own voice. Always respecting everybody's comfort level. If someone doesn't want to talk, they don't have to. But this is an icebreaker around the introduction, and all these icebreakers are contained in the material so that you use different ones as the sort of confidence within the group gets better. So you start using present tense questions, you know, what did God say to you today? Or, you know, questions that will challenge them to a more deeper answer, if you like. But that's all explained in the material. Then you go into a self-awareness section. The self-awareness section would deal with a lot of the material that we've been teaching or looking at over the last couple of days. The whole seminar would deal with a lot more issues, but 1 week, self-awareness, you would deal with, say, the whole subject of defenses, how we use them to protect ourselves from the truth. And because we're talking about it generally, it's not counseling, the facilitator or the leader of the group is there to keep the thing flowing. People will say, yeah, I've got defenses. Well, yeah, that's me. I didn't realize that I was like that. And so that evening you would deal with defenses. Another night you will deal with the trap that we talked about yesterday, how life-controlling problems develop. Another one will deal with feelings. And another one will deal with trust and stuff like that. It's all in the manual. And then there's a spiritual awareness section, which is about 25 minutes. And that is based upon the passage in 2 Peter where he says, add to your faith love, to love kindness, to kindness godliness, to perseverance, self-control, knowledge, goodness, faith. The first session, first week, would be an orientation session, and then you'd move into weeks 2 to 8 in the spiritual application through each aspect that Peter is saying. Because in that passage, if you read it further down, Peter says, if you do this, you will never fall. Well, that's a copper-bottom guarantee. If you add to your faith goodness, to goodness knowledge, to knowledge self-control, to self-control perseverance, to godliness, kindness, love, then you will never fall. People fall because they get some faith. They might not even understand what faith is really. But when they've got some faith in God, they try then to go from faith to love. It's like climbing a ladder with no rungs in between. And you keep falling. You can't make it. So each week you're building upon a spiritual precept, and we deal with different aspects of faith, of goodness. For example, the Greek word that is used, interpreted goodness, has 3 meanings, and one aspect of the meaning is commitment. One aspect of goodness is commitment. So that is the shade of meaning that we take when we say goodness. Add to your faith commitment. Because a person with a life-controlling problem has no commitment. He's a runner, as we said yesterday. He needs to consolidate every day a new commitment to God. Then add to your faith knowledge. That aspect of it is not now cramming your head full of facts, but it is experimental, practical knowledge of Jesus. And then the final aspect of the evening is application. How do we apply this truth to our daily life. What does it mean to you to have a commitment? What does your faith mean to you? And because the people have their own workbook, they will have gone through that before they come to the class. So they will have some answers already written down. You don't look at their workbook, but it's there so that when they come to the class, you won't be throwing questions at them cold. So with some confidence, they'll be able to refer to the notes and give you some answers. Okay, so there's this application. And the whole thing is designed to last between an hour and a quarter, or at the maximum, an hour and a half. So it's quite a short evening, specifically designed for that, because a lot of people coming will have babysitters at home, they'll have husbands that object to them coming, and we have to observe very closely the commitment that they're making to come out. The insight group then, for those who need help to stay free from life-controlling problems. After 9 weeks, these people say, well, we're enjoying this, we'd like to go on and learn how to help other people, so they move into a concerned persons group. This is to help people that've got loved ones with life-controlling problems. Same format, introduction, that we had before there, what was it? Introduction, self-awareness, spiritual awareness, and application. In this class, people are learning the skills that they can use to help other people that they love. There is the intercessory prayer group I mentioned. Other people will be praying at the same time. A communications group. Prevention group. And then we have, the next one is a support group. Now, I haven't got time to go into the way the dynamics of the groups develop, but after 2 sessions being in the insight group and the concerned persons group, a lot of these people are saying, you know, this is working for us. We really have built up relationships here. We'd like to keep this going if we can. So you can then develop a support group. And the support group would use materials that the church felt were appropriate. Could be anything that your church thought were good discipleship material. In particular, Jimmy Lee took the 12-step plan of AA, and he has Christ-centered every step into a living free group. So this is a 12-week group, and every step is Christ-centered. So again, there's a leader's manual and a group manual. This could become a further material for you to use. In Teen Challenge, we have 14 group studies that we use. Through the Turning Point program, churches could avail themselves of these 14 group studies, and they can actually begin teaching them in the small group in the same way as we do in our residential rehabs. Or you can use other material, but the main thing is the group has got something going. The group feels comfortable with itself. It's a learning experience. It's relationships, and they want to keep the thing going. Now, as I said, the leaders here are going to try to circulate churches and see what level of interest there is for this program to be offered as one of the as teaching material for those who will come in through the gym crusades. And if churches are interested in availing themselves of the material, then we are under contract to the United States. We have to sign agreements with them because they protect this program very jealously. It's taken a lot of time and effort to perfect it, and they will not allow it to be taught by anyone that hasn't gone through their seminars, etc. So for your church to use it, it would need to send representatives to a full Turning Point seminar, and then from that moment on, you can actually begin to avail yourselves of the manuals and start your insight group going. You would have someone else in the insight group with you as a co-leader. That person would begin to learn how to do it, and then when you start the next one, you've already got another leader trained, and you go through the same thing. Some churches in America now have got up to 300 people in one church who are simultaneously going through different insight groups. And one church in particular now is having a full-time paid staff purely to run Turning Point in their church, because they've seen such a dramatic improvement in the quality of church life, because there is this area now of input, and people are being so blessed. It's cut down a lot of the workload as well of people seeking help when really all they need is insight. Because a lot of people know what their problems are, and other people, when they find out what their problems are, they know what the answers are. It's just a question of applying them. And you know, people run from one counsellor to another, sometimes just trying to find a counsellor who will give them the answer they want. And it's a waste of time, isn't it? Chris, can I just ask you to share 2 or 3 minutes now? We're almost on time, but if you can bear, because Chris comes from a church in the Midlands that's been using Turning Point for quite a few years now, and I didn't know he was here, so he came, spoke to me after one of the meetings. I said, well, you know, tell us the truth.
Yeah, it's just like our pastor. You say something Sunday morning, and Sunday night you're on the platform speaking. Yeah, our church has run Turning Point for about 3 years. We heard about a seminar at the Elim Bible College up at Nantwich, and we went because we thought it was purely for alcoholics. We didn't understand what it was about, but when we got there we realised it fitted virtually every bill. We all go through the same emotional problems. The pastor, one of my elders, and myself went along. We got so enthused by it, we took it back to our own church. We had initially some problems because a lot of our people, especially the older ones, have grown up with the fact that if you have a problem, you don't tell the neighbours, it's embarrassing. We don't want anybody to know that we're not a full Christian, we're not smiling all day long. But we set it up, and I'm probably what you call the coordinator underneath our minister. And we were so enthusiastic that I put our minister through it, and he suddenly realised why he was having problems with a particular portion of our church who didn't like to speak to him because he wouldn't listen to them. And he admits now he's had a problem listening to people, and until he went through Turning Point, he didn't realise why this was happening. He's one of these people so full of God that he thought he knew the answers before he heard the questions. And that's our own minister. We've run it for 3 years. We run the various groups. We've had some success. We've had some failures. But I want to tell you, it does actually work. I tried to write some notes down, and I've got 2 minutes to tell you 3 years' experience. Just briefly, we are not professionals. We are only there to help other people. Firstly, to realise that they're not alone. Hurting people often think they're alone. Nobody would understand. There's nobody else has gone through it. And what we so often find in these groups, a small group, we don't run it in the church, we run it in people's homes, because we don't want the stigma of going into this group and everybody seeing them, which we thought was a fear, but actually isn't. But people start to share things, and they start to bring things out, usually from childhood, things that they've locked away for years. And all of a sudden, when one shares, the next person opens up. And so the group starts to develop this trust, which has to be earned. The difficulty I have is that it's totally confidential. Even I don't know all that goes on, all that is said, unless there's a particular need. So I can't share a lot of what's been said, but I can tell you that it does actually work. I work in a small Pentecostal, no, I work in a Pentecostal church in a small village, not a small church. We do have several groups that run. We've gone through a number of groups. We sit in people's houses in small groups, and we talk about our hopes and our fears, our desires. And we've helped numerous people. The biggest shock, though, it actually took us about 6 months to start it, because I had to train other people following the seminar. And the biggest shock that we had is we started to look at our own lives. And we didn't think that we had problems. We thought we were all right, we were Christians. I'm a deacon in the church. I don't have a problem as a deacon. The elders don't have a problem as elders. And the biggest shock was it touched us, first of all. It made us realise some of the things that have gone on in our past and how we were touched. And by being touched ourselves, it helped us to understand what other people would start to feel and how gentle we had to be in facing someone with the truth, in saying to someone, well, I appreciate what you're saying, but do you think it could have been in this way? Confronting their denial systems. We had to first of all confront our own denial systems. It took us 12 months before we really had it up and running. And for the past 2 years, we've been up and running. Just a couple of things I want to share with you. We had one young girl. Now this young girl really is beautiful. I'm not just pretty, she's a beautiful young girl. She had everything going for her. She had absolutely no self-confidence. It stemmed from something that had happened in her family as a child. Just precious, nothing else, just precious. She felt she was worthless. And we took her through a 9-week course, and we actually saw the change halfway through the group. Just halfway. We weren't even there. And somebody shared something and she came back, she's burst out crying. She said, I've got to say this, it's not important. It was to her. It may not have been to anybody else. But she is a committed Christian. She's in there. The children go to Sunday school. Her husband's in the church. Her dad's in the church. Her mum's in the church. Her sister's in the church. And there's been such a tremendous change in her life simply through being able to talk to somebody who was able to show her that she was special. Even if you're not special to your family, you're special to Jesus. And that's what we need to get over to people, that they have a worth, that they're special. I have another lady, she's well into her 60s. She's a counsellor, a professional counsellor, who was having terrible relationships with her family, her sister. Her mum had died, she hated her mum. And 7 weeks into the course, somebody said something, and we just said, do you want to share? It's your turn, or do you want to pass? She says, no, I'll say something. And she started to cry. And we just left it, just silence. And we said, do you want to pass? She says, no. She said, I've got to say this. When I was 15, I became pregnant, and I had an abortion. And she's pro-life, she's anti-abortion. And she said, I've locked it away in my life since I was 15 years old. This is 50 years ago. And it's destroyed my marriage, it's broke my relationship with my son. I hated my mother, even to the point I was glad that she died. And it was all locked up to do with the fact that she blamed herself for what went wrong. And she's a great Christian in our church. She's going on. She counsels people in the church now. She talks to people. She shares her life with them to show you that you're not alone. And it was all through Turning Point. She'd been in our church quite a number of years. She spoke to pastor and all the rest of it. But she needed to know she wasn't alone. We do have some failures. We have people walk out. And I always tell my people who run the groups, don't worry. Because I often believe that the Holy Spirit will move out obstructions to others. And we've had people walk out and said, this is rubbish. And what they're really saying is, I'm frightened to open myself up to someone else. I'm frightened to face up to the truth of what I've locked away. We have people who go through it and walk out at the end and say, I got nothing out of it. And again, it's because they put nothing into it. Not that the course didn't work, but they didn't want to work within the course. I want to finish on a couple of things. We have taken social workers through our courses, social workers in our church. And it's helped them not only in their own lives, but dealing with, particularly social workers dealing with children from homes, broken homes. We've taken counsellors through it. We've shown it to the local friendly doctors who think it's a great course. We've actually taken it into the hospital to a consultant who deals with alcoholics. One of our members went into the hospital to dry out because she's so addicted and wasn't allowed out for 3 weeks. But the consultant allowed her to come out, supervised, to attend this course because he felt it was good. This is a secular consultant who doesn't want nothing to do with religion, but believes that when you take out of someone's life a problem, you leave a hole. And if you can't fill it, they will drag that problem back in. And we need to put the Holy Spirit there. We need to put Jesus and the love of Jesus into that position. And I want to finish with one little thing. It's a lady who's in our church who's gone through our course. As a child, she was sexually and physically abused by her father. She grew up and she's covered in tattoos. She's about 4'6" high and 4 foot across, and she really blesses me because no matter what problem she has, she's always got a sparkle in her eye when she talks about Jesus. She came in to our course, and out came the fact that she'd ended up on the street corners because she felt she had no worth to anyone. Her father had done this, she was dirty, she was to blame, she'd caused it, and she ended up on street corners. She met a lad who was an alcoholic, who was a drug addict, and she ended up in that group and married that lad into that group. She's now got a family. Her husband is still an alcoholic, still takes drugs. She's the only one in the church. Her son is now on heroin, and she's asking us, can we help him? And the answer is yes, if he wants to be helped. Her daughter, 15, has just had a baby by a married man. Just after that, the man's girlfriend, not his wife, girlfriend, beat this girl up and threatened to kill her. A few months ago, she had this baby. She's now pregnant by somebody else. This is a vicious circle that goes on in our world. I always describe it as a helter-skelter, but an upside-down one. You get on at the top, you enjoy the view, and you go down slowly, and it's a good ride. Halfway down, you don't know where you are, and you're trapped, and it's getting faster and faster and faster, and the only way is down. She is now trying to break that circle for her family. Through Turning Point, through the church. It isn't easy. It does take time. I would love to say more, but I must finish. Let me say it does work. For every single failure, there is tremendous success. And if we can put a minister through it and help him to find a problem in his own life, then what can it do for the rest of the people within the church? Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for that unsolicited report. Last year I was here and shared some of the principles with the Assemblies of God conference that was here, and Pastor Warwick Shenton is the General Superintendent of AOG, here this week. He came to me and said, I think every AOG pastor ought to go through the Turning Point material. He was so impressed with it himself. And you know, it's nice when you get men of stature and maturity who are able to recognize the worth of it. The same with Pastor Jim Dick, who's here, who was the principal of Eden Bible College. He's anxious now to start using it in Scotland, where he's gone as General Superintendent. So hopefully people are waking up to the fact that we need to present tools. That's all it is a tool. It'll only be as good as you make it, because tools are there to be used, and it's the user that makes best use of them. So thank you for your attention. I hope I've sown some seeds that will take root and that whetted your appetite, and who knows, maybe we'll meet again in a seminar somewhere or other. All right, God bless you.